Blizzard, it was time after so long to check out Diablo 4. Diablo 4 I dodged at launch. Blizzard sent me a code very kindly. They didn't ask anything of me. They were like, hey, Diablo 4's coming. Here's a code for you. Enjoy. And I didn't touch it because at the time, you might forget, it was the big announcement where they were like, okay, we want you all to return to the campus in Anaheim. And after talking to a lot of people at Blizzard, they were kind of under the impression they were never going back. It was internally that's what was going on. And a lot of them have moved, like, away to a much cheaper place to live than California. And now they were being told to come back. And the message received, I don't know if Bex can dig it up, but it was a while ago because someone recorded the call where Mike Ibarra was talking. He kind of said, well, if you don't like it, leave. And they were like, I've got a whole new life over here. My kids are in a school, blah, blah, blah. And you kind of said we probably weren't going to be doing this, etc., etc. But I wasn't too happy with Blizzard at the time. So I was like, screw it. I'm not going to play Diablo 4. I'm going to move on. And now things have turned around a little bit. It's been pretty good. And it was time to have a little look-see. It was mainly by Jeeth, the Jeethabel. Jeeth was like, the campaign is really good. Because obviously the meme has been for so long, just D4 bad. I don't know, that doesn't really, it's vague, let's put it that way. Doesn't really nail down what exactly is the problem. And with the new expansion coming, they've been in contact with me, like, hey, we kind of want you to try Diablo, we want you to be in a tournament and things like that. It's like, can you check it out and see what you think? So I was like, okay, the time seems to be right. Let's have a look-see and see what's going on. So this TDP will be the first day of doing the main campaign. I did play the new class, which is Spiritborn. That is two reasons. One, to see what their advancement is on the basics. Usually I play something like a barbarian, but I was like, I always end up spinning to win in ARPGs. Generally, it's like a Cyclone type build. Obviously, a lot of my experience comes from PoE, and so I was like, let's go with something new, and I am going to be playing that in the tournament as well. So I was like, they're going to give me a pre-made character thing for this tournament. So I was like, I should probably play it and mess around with it and see what it's like. Okay. Set the groundwork. There it is. Diablo 4. What was I expecting? Well, I did play Diablo 3, but I played it one time through to kill Diablo, and that was my first ARPG. I didn't play Diablo 1 or Diablo 2 or anything like that, and PoE, when it came out, I was balls deep in doing day-to-day World of Warcraft content on YouTube, so I just was like, I can't jump into this massive game, and by the time I got time to play it, PoE had been going on for many years and was now this monolithic mega game that was, we did wonderful things with to check it out, and you can play through that blind for the campaign and things. So that was my experience. I played Diablo 3 and didn't really understand what we were doing, which is my fault, I suppose. But like, I played through Diablo 3 with 3 friends, had a decent time. We killed Diablo, and I was like, oh wow, we did it. Now we're going into the end game, right? No. Then we immediately got warped back to the first town and to just play through it. And then the guys were like, oh yeah, we have to play through the whole campaign 3 times. Because it was locked at the time. I believe they changed this in the future, but it was hard locked. If you wanted to get to the end game, you had to play the campaign 4 times total, I think it was. Then you can go to the proper end game. And I was like, I'm not doing that. I had fun. I didn't have to do this 4 times fun. That wasn't what I was into at all. I was like, I'm out, boys. Yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. And they were like, oh, okay, we thought you understood this. I'm like, no, I didn't. And yeah, so I got it in my head. I was like, so we're going to play like the exact same thing again? And they're like, yeah. And they were all on board for it because they knew the story. But I was like, I'm out. That's the last time I touched Diablo 3. I didn't play Reaper of Souls or anything like that, despite the fact that a lot of people were telling me it was way, way better. I just left the game alone at that point and then moved over and played PoE whenever I possibly could. Okay, there we are. Now you know where I'm at. So, Diablo 4, what was I expecting? It doesn't matter what I was expecting because it's not what I got. I don't think I would have guessed what I got with Diablo 4. Not in a bad way, but I have a lot. And it's dawned on me, I have a lot of ingrained training in my brain from Path of Exile. And there is a lot of changes here that I wasn't expecting. So to start off, the game is a lot slower in terms of its progression paths because it's far more like an MMO than something like PoE. PoE has multiplayer, obviously, but it's more built seemingly around the big solo monolithic destruction. They know that the core of PoE is its gameplay. And anything. And I've spoken to, Chris Wilson, and I've sat with Jonathan Rogers on multiple times, who's the lead director on PoE 2. And I've played a lot of PoE 2. And we're always discussing the strength of the game is the gameplay. The more you're smashing monsters to pieces, the more fun you're having in those games. And we regularly talked on and off camera about anything that interrupts that process, because I want to know about the PoE story, for example. But the PoE story is told in these monolithic monologues from people that go on for many, many minutes in some occasions, where they're trying to explain. And it's like, I just want to get back to killing stuff, because that's where the fun of the game is. And Jonathan Rogers actually appreciated that. I was like, yeah, we realized that, coming up to PoE 2, it's like, what are we going to do here? Because we want people to enjoy the story, but like, we know people just want to get back out there and start shredding and murdering and looting. That's what the game's about. Diablo 4 takes a different route with far less, at least where I'm up to now, which is the first like 6 or 7 hours, far less quantity of loot dropping, but much more relevant. I kind of like that. I didn't get much, if any, wasted items. Like, I did very quickly reach the point that if it wasn't like a rare item, it probably wasn't worth picking up anymore. But your inventory, I love that your inventory is like, regardless of the size of the item, it's one slot. So if clearing out your bank, which you could do very, very easily, was really simple. And then getting back to just filling out that inventory and coming back with a full inventory for the stuff. And it wasn't like I didn't have to play Tetris with all the items. Some people find that fun. I'm less interested when we're dropping quite a lot of items in doing that kind of stuff and leaving a lot of potentially this is okay, blah, blah, blah. Assessing every item, which I know over time you stop doing in the early game. But still, this was fun. I also liked that chests were relevant. I know that sounds really stupid, but if you've played PoE for any amount of time, you realize that background scenery is massively unimportant to just getting more monsters and just murdering them into the floor as fast as humanly possible. Whereas, like, clicking a chest, that is well worthwhile so far, at least in Diablo 4, because it kind of always gives you something reasonably good. And if you see them, you should click them, and they're going to be far fewer of them. There's tons and tons of chests lying all over a PoE map. In Diablo 4, you might get 1, maybe 2, sometimes more. But they're going to drop some good stuff. That was great. I played on hard mode, which is not the hardest mode by any means, but it was the hardest difficulty available to me at the time. I definitely encountered, surprisingly, some really tough encounters earlier on. Certainly for someone with inexperience with the game like I had, where there were some very, very nasty elites with really awful overlapping mechanics and affixes on them, in some ridiculously tight corridors. Like, definitely started to suffer a couple of deaths in dungeons when it was an extremely tight corridor. There might be 3 or even 4 elites. I still don't have my ultimate skill at that point. And they're doing, like, stone encasement while also dropping pools on the floor, while also preventing... So I had to use my abilities to, like, jump over those and save those instead of using them for DPS, because I was going to be eradicated if I didn't do that, while mixed with all sorts of other different kinds of things. That was actually kind of interesting, because it started to get me a really engaging gameplay experience very early on in the game. Like, it was like the bosses were, as tends to happen in ARPGs, the bosses were generally easier than some of the trash packs you encounter, which is fun because they gave a ton of experience and usually dropped some good loot as well. You were rewarded for dealing with them. That was a really fun experience. The slowness I'm talking about is a lot of time in town, chit-chatting, especially if you're listening to what's going on. A lot of story, side quests. There's renown in here. Like, there's completionist stuff. That Ubisoft-style completionist stuff is like you want to complete everything on the map. And I'm pretty sure there's a high chance that you do want to complete all those things. Again, I'm playing blind, so I'm letting the game teach me how it works. In that respect, it doesn't do a great job. And that was a little frustrating, for sure, is it doesn't do a great job of explaining itself. It's one of those things, and I know some people are going to be like, it does it here and here and here, is that if you're used to it, and you've gotten used to it, then it seems like it does everything. But actually, when you go back and you do it, like, if you go back and do it completely blind without reading a guide or anything, it's like, no, it doesn't do it particularly well. For example, you unlock these aspects, I think they're called, after clearing a dungeon. So what it does is you'll clear this dungeon or you'll achieve something, and it'll say, you've unlocked this aspect, and you're like, oh, wow. And then you can open the menu, and it will say, you got this aspect. And you're like, cool, what is that? More often than not, there are aspects. In fact, in my case, because I was the Spiritborn, which doesn't have any aspects at all for that class in the main campaign because it didn't exist, is none of them work for me. But I didn't know that, which is fine. I understand that. But what I couldn't do was check without having to go through multiple filters to be like, oh, like real mess around in the menu, instead of it just being like something you hover your mouse over. Because it'll show you like a picture of it, but you can't hover the mouse over and say what it is. So if I was like a newbie and I just bought the expansion in the game, people are kind of hype about it, I wouldn't know what the hell was going on. And you have to do multiple selections of filters to be like, oh, this isn't for me. Although, you know, it kind of shows it off. And it even has a big graphic saying you have this thing that you can see on the menu, but it doesn't tell you what it is. Similar with gem crafting, actually. Like, I remembered certain things came back from Diablo 3, like I didn't like the gems in that game, is that you kept having to, like, just increase the level of the same style of gem. It's seemingly very similar here, but it eventually did open the gem vendor, and I was like, oh, okay, we craft our gems, and I'm looking through. But it wasn't clear on, like, okay, if I gem my gear and then I disassemble that gear, does it go back into here? And it's actually in separate inventories on your main inventories, like, oh, there's one for gems and stuff like that, but it never told me that. So I was like, okay. And it's only by clicking around. And in fact, some people, like, yeah, you have to press like this shortcut, you have to do this and this. This happened with a number of things, by the way. It's like, oh yes, you if you press like S here, or you press T over here, the teleport, and if you go here, then this will work. And eventually I got my head around it. It's not like it's complex, it's just not shown to you because there's a lot of sub-menus and little windows that you have to go through. So I think that could do with a better job. Is just having more things that you just mouse over and it tells you what to do. Or it just gives you information that's presented to you. Like I said, it graphically shows you it, but it doesn't tell you what's going on with it. That would be cool. It's getting a mount early. I believe in the original game you got your mount much later, but I got my mount very, very quickly, which was nice. It's a nice little convenient thing for this open world type environment that they're going for. I'm still torn on whether I like this or not. I think it's fine. One thing I found after a few hours is like, okay, I need to stop thinking about comparing this to PoE because it's not that. This is a very different game. It is an ARPG, but it's like saying all FPSs are the same. That's just blatantly untrue, right? It's massively untrue. Counter-Strike is not the same as Fortnite, right? It's just not. So it's one of those things where you're like, okay, this is just a different way of looking at things. This is far more, to me actually, it was far more like World of Warcraft. It felt like a leveling World of Warcraft experience. I've got my mount, I've got side quests, I've got stories and things like that. I've got main quests to go on. I've got things that are in the world. I'm like, is this rares? These are elites, these are little events. There's a dungeon here, there's a fort, there's a stronghold I can go and attack. There's a world boss spawning, all kinds of things that are very much more MMO style than they are like to a straight ARPG style. So I was having fun with that actually, and by the end I was like, this is fine. It's really fine. The gameplay is still the king, but it's not as the majority. Like PoE is like 90% gameplay, 10% everything else, right? Whereas this is more like 60% gameplay, at least for now. 40% everything else, right? There's a lot of stuff here to do. I wonder, my theories so far about D4 bad. What does that mean? I suspect, and I could be wrong because I haven't reached it yet, so pinch of salt, it's just my theories right now, is that I'm eventually going to be in a situation where I need to go back and like completionist the game to unlock renown in order to get something. Either extra skill points or some sort of rewards or something along those lines or some sort of power gain. I suspect that's going to happen because I really think I can just turbo through the MSQ and get it done like I would do in, say, PoE. And the most you have to do then is maybe go back and collect your passive points, of which there's like 20, and they take literally like less than 40 seconds each to go and pick up once you know what you're doing. I suspect here there may be many hours of going back and like doing every single little dungeon, collect all the things. Oh God, can we talk about picking up herbs and iron ore and just... I hate this. I really do. The last thing I want to do in my monster killing game is stop and go and pick up and farm herbs and things like that along the sides. Like, that's not for me at all. That's something I can definitely just do without. I don't need that in my life. It's not what I want. It's like, oh, you need to upgrade your healing potion. Have you collected enough herbs? And so far, passively, I have. I wonder at some point again in the future, it's like, no, well, actually, this herb only drops in this certain dungeons. You're going to have to do 10 of the dungeons, and then you get the big healing potion. And like, instead of like, just having the latest flask drop because you've reached that area of the game. So here you go. Here's a better healing potion to coincide with your progress. Because ultimately, these are things you're going to be able to modify and add enhancements to and things like that. So they're really not worth thinking about. But that's where I'm at right now. So far, so good, actually. I haven't had the D4 bad experience. Some faults here and there, which are more from like, you need to figure this out or you're going to Google it or someone's going to tell you and then you're like, oh, okay, that's how that works. But so far, very simple. I can kind of appreciate that this is nowhere near as complex as PoE. And that's okay. I think that's actually very preferable to a lot of people. Is like, okay, this isn't that... So far, I don't know where the crafting goes and whether it gets absolutely maniacal towards the end to create really good items. I think the RNG is in line with RPGs. It's always frustrating regardless what game it is. So one of the things is I can craft a proc or a bonus to like some of my gear. So I had one that could boost my main attack, but it also did stuff for other spells that I don't have, and it was RNG, not only on the quantity roll, or the power roll, which is very normal in RPGs, but also which one. And you have a limited number of tries. Oh, I know what I wanted to talk about. I still find it kind of weird that all the items aren't tradable, and then it does soulbind them to you in an ARPG. I'm so used to the idea that if you craft something awesome, but it's crap for you, is that you can still like trade that to somebody else. It's not a wasted go because that offsets the nightmare RNG that you get in these games when you're trying to make these super mega powerful items and they're a gamba, right? You can brick the item completely, or maybe you got it like I just said there, you get a random result from what you apply to these items. Is that on occasion you're going to do that, and it's going to be a super awesome weapon, just not for you. Just not for you. And you can offset the goods and the investment you've made into that weapons, or the armor, or jewelry, or whatever, by trading it to somebody who's like, that's sick for me. It's bad for you, but it's dope for me. That is an amazing item. Okay, cool. I'll trade it away. I'll sell it for currency or whatever, and I can have another go at making mine, right? But they soulbind things here. I believe there's probably some sort of internal auction house Blizzard reasoning for this. I don't know what. I don't think there's a real money auction house. I haven't checked that. But I assume that's kind of the process that's going on with it here. I suspect that might be the case. By the way, I'm going to put another few hours into the campaign and see where it takes me, and then come back. Will we reach the end game before I go away? Remember, I'm leaving on the Thursday morning, so I don't know. I really don't know, but we'll find out, all right? So, early D4 impressions. Good, so far. Pretty good. Different, that's all. Different, and people fear different. So I get that, because it's not working the way my other game works. No different than when we try other MMOs. This isn't how my other MMO works. All right, I'll see you later. Bye-bye.